Hi everyone. I wanted to talk about the government's recent veiled threat to eliminate teachers and education workers' right to strike and force us to do what we currently do as volunteers. On June 30th, Premier Ford said, quote, "My message to the teachers' unions is one thing. Those kids have to be back in school in September, and they have to be back in school with extracurricular activities," end quote. Everyone wants kids back in school, and we as teachers and education workers certainly want extracurricular activities running. More on that in part 2 of this video. But the Ford government, instead of negotiating, is starting out by setting up a dangerous situation, telling us that we no longer have our democratic right to strike. He can't declare that because we are not enslaved. All workers have the right to strike. Governments have imposed essential worker legislation, which means it eliminates the legal right to strike of, say, for example, nurses and doctors. But if the employer and the workers' unions cannot agree on working conditions, it would then go to an independent arbitrator. The problem is that the government is now using legislation like Bill 124 to interfere in arbitration and make arbitrators' decisions subject to what the government tells them they can decide. In other words, there is no balance between the worker and the employer. The government has now given itself all the power. Trying to eliminate teachers and education workers' right to strike and force us to do extracurricular activities is something that successive governments, both Liberal and PC, have tried to do in Ontario in different ways. This is not new. They see us, those who provide education, as the enemies of education and try to vilify us and our unions because they know that we will not accept things that will harm students or our profession. We get blamed for all the problems of the education system when these are social and political problems that could be addressed. What is new now is that more than ever, as a society as a whole, we recognize the indispensable role that education plays and the vital role that extracurriculars play in keeping students engaged and healthy in school and in their lives outside of school. The experience of the last 2 years during the pandemic has made this clear to everyone. The point, however, is what does it mean to learn from this realization? It seems with Ford's assertion that his government has not learned much from the pandemic. Imposing dictate on people and then using police powers to enforce it does not work. By declaring that teachers and education workers must be in school with extracurricular activities without addressing any of the issues that are needed to guarantee them, the government is heading down a dangerous path of conflict, positioning itself for a fight, and trying to divide teachers and education workers from each other as they set up this false debate. Pro versus con, making teachers and education workers paid and unpaid work essential. We can decide that our work is essential, but the meaning of essential needs to be very clear so there is no confusion. Essential does not mean the government dictates that our work can never be withdrawn. Essential means that our work is so vital to student learning, and so the government has a responsibility to make sure it is fully supported so it can carry on. But instead of involving everyone in discussing what it means to make this important work essential on terms that are acceptable to everyone, he's setting it up so that when teachers and education workers do say no to unacceptable conditions, such as increased class sizes, cuts to school funding, mandatory online courses, etc., that then we, those who stand up to the government, can be blamed. And then the full force of the law can be used against us, making our actions illegal. I call on everyone not to fall into the trap the government is setting up. Let's discuss what's needed post-pandemic in education. And don't forget, if it weren't for our opposition as teachers and education workers, kids would have huge class sizes, 4 mandatory online courses to graduate, and other worse conditions. So we are the ones who hold the line. If the government tries to pass legislation to make us essential workers in order to remove our right to strike, it is to blame for whatever chaos this creates, because we have never accepted our rights being violated, and we ain't about to start.